I've been saying for a few weeks now, I think he needs a breather. I think he needs a break. And leaving him in could be detrimental to the player himself and to the team as a whole. Well, hello again from here at Newcastle United's training ground. Now, yeah, I've had to come indoors again. I did plan to take this back on the streets of Gosforth, though there's been one or two requests for Jesmond as well. But sadly, guys, the wind machine, someone's turned it back on, but also the rain as well. It's absolutely horrible out there. So yeah, I've sought sanctuary beneath the cover here in the indoor barn. I'm half expecting the first team to run in any minute from that door over there, given how wet and wild it is outside. Well, within 30 seconds of me saying that, a club official entered the barn. All he needed was one of those fourth official boards with 1 minute on it. Yeah, I didn't have much time, not enough to get through everything I want to, so I was on my way. And because it's still raining outside, because it's still windy, I've had to come here to one of my little boys' rooms. And to be honest with you, I've realised it's not a bad studio. After all, I should use it more often. And at the very end of the video, I'll tell you one or two stories about those kits over my shoulder, some of which used to belong to me when I was a little boy, and I found them in an attic just recently. So yeah, before we get to that, hang around if you are interested. We've got a lot to get through. I was at Eddie's press conference this morning, and the only place to start is with the fitness updates and the injury news. Now, earlier in the week, I tweeted that Anthony Gordon's injury wasn't serious, but as of yet, there wasn't a time frame on when he would be back. That was a message relayed by Eddie Howe this morning. He said, yes, Anthony Gordon won't play down at Nottingham Forest tomorrow, but he has avoided serious injury. I think they're waiting for the ankle to settle down before they make a real estimate. But now, Alexander Isak is another who has avoided, quote, serious injury. I wrote last week they were looking at around 3 weeks for Isak. That will keep him out of the game at Forest tomorrow and Bournemouth next weekend as well. Perhaps after that, we could be looking at his return. But as we've seen in the past with Isak, something which isn't serious, which is estimated at 2 or 3 weeks, can extend into 4, 5s and 6s. And this comes back to what I have said on the eve of the season and at every point during the season. Even when Alexander Isak is playing well and scoring goals, and there is rightly praise out there for him, I've been consistent in this message. And it's getting to the point now where there is a little bit of annoyance with me, because Isak's injury is, for me, derailing the progress and the recovery of the team, and that is a compliment in many ways because he is so good. Now, if Alexander Isak doesn't pick up the groin injury down at Aston Villa, I honestly think Newcastle beat Luton on Saturday. As it is, and I said this before the game, that Isak's injury in effect took 2 players away from Newcastle. It took a wonderful striker through the middle in Isak, and it meant Anthony Gordon had to move in from the left to centre forward, so they were left without Anthony Gordon on the left wing, which in turn, I think that had an impact on Dan Burn at the other end of the pitch. So there you go. Isak's injury and the knock-on effect, and the question I ask of myself, I've asked of you guys, and I continue to ask now is, can Newcastle make progress, and can Newcastle go forward with a striker who statistically only starts 50% of the games which he should be available for? It's a question. I don't know the answer. It is one I'm minded to say, yes, they can go forward because he is so good, and they've got to find a way whereby Isak plays more and he's got more help. Because what I would say on the flip side of that is, when Callum Wilson is fit, Alexander Isak is fit, is Wilson the player who needs to be sacrificed in order to allow Isak more rest and to manage his body properly? Or do you just have to say, if you've got a player who needs that in the first place, then why do you persevere with that? As I've always said, the deal with the best players, the deal with the top players is they're fit and they're available to play. And right now, the evidence available to us on Alexander Isak at Newcastle is that he's not. And that is becoming a frustration, and that for Newcastle is becoming a real problem. Now, another player whose prolonged absence is becoming a problem for Newcastle, and again, this is a compliment because of the difference he makes on the team, is Joe Willock. And it was a question I asked of Eddie this morning. Eddie smiled as I said it. I said, Eddie, you've said for a while now that Willock is getting closer, he's getting closer, he's getting closer. He laughed at that. He said he knew exactly what I meant and where I was coming from, because he has the same frustration. And with Willock now, I think I reported in January, we were expecting to see Willock perhaps in early February. Early February has come and gone, and I said to Eddie this morning, can you take us inside the injury? Can you explain to us the nature of it, and will we see him before the end of the month? He said in answer to that he hoped so. But he said with Achilles injuries, and especially with a recurring Achilles injury, you never know a player is back until they're back. And that, for me, was a really telling quote, because what it said is they don't know if Joe Willock is going to be fit until he is actually fit. And I didn't ask this question, but is there a danger for me that Joe Willock could be looking at yet more time on the sidelines? Is his season in danger, in doubt. These are my words, not Eddie Howe's words. Well, I think there's got to be a threat of that, because he's come back once already before and he has broken down. So Willock for me is a massive, major concern, continues to be so. And I say that again, as I mentioned earlier, just because what he does bring to that midfield. Now, we'll get on that subject in a moment. It's something I want to talk about and something we did explore with Eddie Howe earlier this morning. But just to wrap up on the team news and the fitness, what does this mean for the team going down to Forest tomorrow? Now, something that was put to Eddie and he didn't deny was a change in system. And if this was me, given the personnel available to him now, and by the way, he said directly that Harvey Barnes isn't in a position yet to start games, and given how long he's been out for, they want to ease him back in. I think that is sensible, but it's not ideal, given Anthony Gordon is out of the team now, so Barnes will start on the bench tomorrow. I think the best option available to Eddie is to go 3-4-3, and that would be to take Louis Miley out of the team now. That isn't a criticism of Miley. I've been saying for a few weeks now, I think he needs a breather. I think he needs a break, and leaving him in could be detrimental to the player himself and to the team as a whole. Now, what I would do is I would bring Callum Wilson in centre forward. I think Eddie has got no choice there. I think even though we spoke to Wilson after the game and he said the last time the reason he got injured again was because he had to play, quote, a storm of games. Well, I'm sorry, Callum, you're probably going to have to come in for a storm of games again, because Alexander Isak is looking at 2 or 3 weeks out. Wilson will come in at centre forward. I think there'll be Murphy on the right, Almiron on the left, and then in midfield, I think he's best off going 4 in midfield. Trippier on the right, Livramento on the left, in midfield 2 of Bruno and Sean Longstaff, and then going to a back 3 of Dan Burn, Sven Botman and Fabian Schär. Now, will he do that? We don't know. I think he'll be given that some consideration. The other alternative is, does he just bring Wilson in for Gordon, put Wilson at centre forward, keep with the same midfield 3, then his only other big decision to make is Dan Burn or Tino Livramento at left back. Now, I think that's a 70-30 call. I think in favour of Eddie will keep faith with Dan Burn. Now, why will he do that? We spoke at length about Dan this morning, and Eddie came out in a really robust defence of him. He said, you've got to remember, this was a player who rushed himself back from a broken back for the good of the team, and in fairness, he pointed to games in which he's been very good recently. Dan Burn isn't really in bad form when you think of his performance down at Fulham, where I gave him man of the match, his performance down at Aston Villa, where I thought for the first 20 minutes he was absolutely instrumental in keeping the game at 0-0. I think he would have been a contender for man of the match, if not for his sticky spell in the second half. Now, during that sticky spell, Eddie helped him by making the change, by bringing Tino Livramento on and going to 5 at the back when Dan Burn was having problems with a right winger. I don't necessarily think Dan Burn was aided on Saturday against Luton when there was clearly an issue there with Luton's right winger. When action was taken, it was too late. Dan Burn had already been at the, would you call it, at fault or, exposed for 2 of the goals? You would certainly say so. Now, with me, it's not a case of criticising Dan Burn or having a go at him. Everything Eddie said this morning in terms of him being one of his best signings, in terms of him being worthy of more respect, in terms of remembering just how good and how brilliant he's been for Newcastle, I agree with all of that. It doesn't mean you can't analyse and say that Dan Burn in certain situations needs help and has been exposed. And the danger going to Forest, which was a game on Boxing Day, up against the winger Alanga, up against the pace of Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs-White, 3 really pacey players, where Dan Burn was, I use that word, exposed. So for me, Eddie has got to look at that pre-game tomorrow rather than during the game, and even worse post-match, where you're talking with hindsight. So for me, I would find a way to get Tino Livramento into the team tomorrow. That doesn't mean taking Dan Burn out, because I do think there is great worth in having him in there, away from home. I think he's been good recently, and I would echo everything Eddie said. And I said in the post-match video last week, I really didn't like the Tino chance against a player who was still on the pitch at the time. And I've spoken to 1 or 2 fans since, and when the game went to 4-4, the atmosphere for me was poor inside the stadium. And I honestly think, and I've spoken to friends and associates about this, that it sucked the atmosphere out of a few. I think they felt it didn't sit easy with them at all, the Tino chance, and by extension what is criticism aimed at one of their own. And because of that, I just think, like I say, at a time when the stadium should have been united and Newcastle should have been pushing for that winner, that 5-4, I thought it was really flat, and that left a little bit of a sour taste. And I do think someone like Dan Burn is worthy of better treatment than that. Now the midfield, come on, we've got 9 minutes in, I haven't spoken about the midfield, which has been my bugbear all season for different reasons. Now this analysis here is slightly different in that it isn't a criticism of the three individuals who are going week on week on week, and they have been doing for a while now because of injury, because of selection issues. That is Sean Longstaff, Louis Miley and Bruno Guimaraes. And I think, listening to Eddie this morning, I think he feels the same. He was at pains to make the same point, that he will not criticise them. But that midfield is a three for me, and I think also for the manager. It's just a three that doesn't work well together. It is the wrong three in terms of personnel. Now, do those three have a place in a midfield that does function and does work well? Absolutely. Individually, can you make a case? Sean Longstaff is scoring goals. Bruno Guimaraes is playing well, although not playing well enough for me consistently. Louis Miley has come in as a 17-year-old and has won rave reviews quite rightly. But as a three, I don't think they're working for the team right now. I don't think they've got the right recovery pace going back over, and I don't think as a three they complement the front three in the way that they do, in terms of that real intensity that a Joe Linton or a Joe Willock would apply to the opposition back four and to the opposition midfielders. So I think a lot of it is breaking down in there. That was the question I asked of Eddie. Has that issue been more detrimental to your season than any other? Now he denied that. He would always sort of say that it's the team and it's the whole, and that there are more elements to it. But for me, it is the midfield and the issues in there at the moment that week on week are causing problems for Newcastle. And this comes back to Dan Burn as well. He was part of a defence last year that was the joint best in the Premier League. But I've always said it was a defence that, when the team played well, didn't have to do a great deal of defending. Now it is having to defend this season. It's having to defend a lot more than it was previously, and because of that, little chinks in terms of pace or mobility are being exposed, especially when you consider Joe Linton has been removed from the left of that midfield three. Anthony Gordon at the weekend was removed from the left. That, if you've got Almiron or Miley on that left side as a result, it is going to result in Dan Burn having to defend more. And yes, he's a defender. Should he be up to that? Well, yes and no. You play to your strengths, and you make allowances for those strengths and for those weaknesses. And at the moment, Newcastle, because of a lack of personnel, are finding certain players in the team, and this is right throughout the team, by the way, not just limited to Dan Burn. They are being exposed more, and limitations are being shown up, and that's why, for me, results haven't been as good as they should have been. Now, going to Nottingham Forest, you would say that the only consistency about Newcastle right now is that inconsistency. Because I honestly thought the two performances, Villa last Tuesday, going into Luton, they were so far removed, they were unrecognisable in terms of that cohesion, that fluency, even that energy and that attacking intent. Even when Newcastle were 1-0, 2-1 up, you never really felt comfortable and convinced. And in the end, I honestly think they were lucky in a way to come away with a point. And yes, while Forest on paper should be one of Newcastle's more winnable games, well, they lost against Forest on Boxing Day, and you never thought you'd say this, but it's good news for Newcastle that Chris Wood's actually out of the game tomorrow, and I don't go there with any degree of confidence really around Newcastle, and that is because they're without Anthony Gordon and Alexander Isak, who are probably two, along with Kieran Trippier and perhaps Bruno Guimaraes, when he is at it, two of Newcastle's four most influential players. And you go to Forest tomorrow and you wouldn't be at all certain really what Newcastle United is going to turn up, and that is a worry on the back of what have been two very decent away performances recently. But that Luton display, that again has just replanted that seed of doubt. And Eddie did admit this morning that his players this season have struggled playing against the so-called lesser teams. They've done better against better teams, and that is a new pressure they're having to deal with. But to that end, they're going to Nottingham Forest tomorrow, so again, that is further reason really to erode at the confidence of Newcastle getting a result. Now, I'll be down at Nottingham Forest tomorrow, but before then, as previously advertised, the story of one or two kits over my shoulder there. Yeah, and as I said, I was in the attic back at my parents' place recently, come across a bag of old strips, and amongst them were these two absolute gems. There you go, Barcelona, Michael Laudrup, number 7, and Marco van Basten, number 9, AC Milan. And the story behind them is, and there's a photo to back this up somewhere, I think I was about 7 or 8 year old on holiday, on a family holiday in Mallorca, and there's a picture of me and my younger sister. I'm wearing the Van Basten shirt, and my sister, who wasn't a football fan, never been a football fan, she was in the Laudrup jersey, which I had made her buy with her spending money from grandparents. So there you go, the influence of an older brother. And my only motivation was, and I got to get, I said, you want to get this strip just a little bit bigger, Janine, so you can grow into it. My only motivation was so that I could fit into both. So I had Van Basten and Laudrup. Now my oldest boy has come across those two and absolutely loves them. As you can probably tell, he's into his retro shirts, and he's what we've got to say, we've got the Beckham Real Madrid. I love the look at this beauty as well. You won't be big enough to fit into this in another 3 or 4 years, but Ronaldo, number 9, Barcelona. So there's a theme emerging there. Wasn't life simpler when all you had to worry about was fitting into nice football jerseys? Yeah, so that's it. I'm off now to make my travel plans for Forest tomorrow. If you do see me on the train, please say hello. Come and have a chat. Always love the feedback and you guys getting involved. Thanks again for all the comments below the line in the last couple of videos. Been some brilliant debate in there. Please again go to the description, click on the link. There's the story of Dan Burn and what Eddie Howe said about him this morning. And also a link as well. I've been out in Spain this week, spent a couple of days with Mark Clattenburg of this parish, talking to him all about his role as the new Gladiators referee, wearing black and white stripes as well, by the way. So there's some good tales in there. Please click on that link. And yeah, I'll be back talking to you from the City Ground with my reflections. In the meantime, please hit like, comment and subscribe. And I'll see you again in 24 hours time. Okay, take care guys. Bye-bye.